You Don't Know Sports is back. Thank you for tuning in to this brand new podcast here on the 4th of September, 2024. You Don't Know Sports is a short collection of stories and facts about various sports subjects that you may or may not have heard about. This brand new You Don't Know Sports podcast is brought to you by YouTube, Spreaker.com, and me, your host, SlimmDa Kid. Keeping with the whole SlimmDa Kid thing, I am also the host of a very popular pro wrestling podcast known as Round 2 Wrestling. Unfortunately, there will not be a brand new Round 2 Wrestling podcast for you, the fan, to enjoy this week due to the previous weekend and the holiday that took place this Monday. College football is a beautiful connection of sport and weird history. Some of the stories that you're going to be hearing are a bit more recent and surprising than others, but the variation is representative of how random college football can be. At the very worst, you could use this list as a means to remind yourself of these teams' past oddities once the college football season continues on and contenders and pretenders are separated. Could you imagine, say, Kirby Smart being the referee for a Clemson-South Carolina game? Because on October 30th, 1902, the only referee for a Clemson-South Carolina game was Furman coach Colonel Charles S. Roller Jr. Clemson had beaten Furman 28-0 the week before. Bronco Armstrong, a Yale football player and official, was going to be the umpire, but he was in a railroad accident on his way to the game. South Carolina won 12-6, its first victory over Clemson. And to put a bow on everything, a riot between fans of the two schools broke out the night after the game because South Carolina students were parading a poster of a gamecock standing over a tiger holding its tail. Clemson and South Carolina wouldn't play again until 1909, and the next memorable brawl wouldn't happen until 2004. Also, more than 100 years later, in 2018, Furman's backup quarterback against Clemson was actually a Clemson student by the name Harris Roberts. Ohio State. There might have been some disappointment in the student body in Columbus, Ohio in 1926 when Maudine Ormsby won Homecoming Queen. It's not because the students didn't like Ormsby, it's because she was a cow. Alabama. The prestigious Alabama football program you know today got off to a good start thanks to a former horse racing journalist from Cleveland named Zen C. Scott. He was the Crimson Tide's coach from 1919 through 1922 and had a 29-9-3 record while at Alabama, including a signature victory over Penn in his final season that put the program on the map. Prior to his time at Alabama, Scott spent time at Case Western Reserve, which is a Division III school in Cleveland, Ohio, and also sounds very much like the name of a bank. Georgia. The Bulldogs nickname isn't uncommon. You probably had a high school in the area where you grew up that had this nickname, and can name plenty of college football teams that use it as well. But the way Georgia took on the name is uncommon. The university's first president, Abraham Baldwin, was a Yale grad. You would think that might have been its inspiration, many do, but it wasn't. And for reference, Yale is known as the Bulldogs. The name Bulldogs came from the work of the Atlanta Constitution and a couple of writers. Morgan Blake wrote on November 3, 1920, that the Georgia Bulldogs would sound good, and 3 days later, after a 0-0 tie with Virginia, Cliff Wheatley used Bulldogs in his story 5 times. It stuck, and somewhere down the line, we got DAWGS Dogs, which is just as great. Penn State. There's a dispute about when the Nittany Lions played their first football game, and the answer depends on who you ask. It's widely held that the first one came in 1887 when they beat Louisburg 54-0. However, in 1881, 13 Penn State students played an informal game at Bucknell, winning 9-0. The game isn't regarded by many as the first because it was played under rules that were closer to rugby than modern football rules, like the game played in 1887. If we're being honest, however, football in either one of those years isn't close to anything being played today, so the claim for 1881 may be valid. Oregon. The Ducks started their football program playing at Hayward Field in 1919 and moved to their current home, Autzen Stadium, in 1967. The Ducks Stadium took 9 months to build after breaking ground and costing approximately $2.3 million. A $250,000 chunk of what was donated by the Autzen Foundation and Thomas E. Autzen, who graduated from Oregon in 1943. However, the stadium is named for Autzen's father, Thomas J. Autzen, who was an alumnus of Oregon State. The Ducks are 19-7-1 against the Beavers in Autzen, so at least there's no curse to be concerned about in Oregon. Florida. In 1912, Florida was in Havana, Cuba, playing a 2-game series that included games against the Vedado Tennis Club and then against the Cuban Athletic Club of Havana, a setup now known as the Bacardi Bowl. The Gators won the first game, which took place on Christmas Day. The second game came on December 28th and was much more contentious than the first. Florida coach George E. Pyle allegedly spent most of the first quarter arguing with officials over holding penalties and the officials' failure to fully enforce penalties against the Cuban Athletic Club. Pyle eventually refused to continue after he learned that the referee was a former coach of the Cuban Athletic Club. As a result, Cuban authorities arrested Pyle at the game for forbidding the suspension of a game for which gate money has been charged, quote-unquote. A judge ordered Pyle to take his team out of town before he put them all in jail, quote-unquote. There wouldn't be another game featuring an American team playing an exhibition in Havana until 1921, when the Cuban Athletic Club won 12-0 over Ole Miss. Louisiana State University. Today we all know LSU's Death Valley is one of the loudest stadiums in all of college football. It wasn't an easy beginning. The stadium's creation was impossible without the building of dormitories for students. Former Louisiana Governor Huey P. Long wanted to fund a stadium for LSU, but wasn't going to be able to get the right funds from the state. However, he saw that there were enough for dorms and had them built as part of a stadium to provide cover for an eventual expansion project. The east side was completed in 1932, the west in 1935. In 1937, the stadium was finished with the completion of the north side. The stadium dorms served as barracks, quote-unquote, for ROTC members until 1969. The dormitories were closed in the late 1980s and probably for the best. It's hard to imagine getting anything done in a dorm in that particular location. Of course, anybody in Baton Rouge would probably be at the game anyways. Oklahoma. John A. Hartz, a student from Kansas, started the Oklahoma football program in September 1895. Oklahoma didn't receive statehood until November 1907. There's not much to be said here other than it seems pretty wild that Oklahoma played college football for 12 years before achieving statehood. The University of Notre Dame. Notre Dame's leprechaun is one of the most recognizable symbols in college football, whether it's the logo or the live mascot at the games. While it's a staple now, Notre Dame took a second and a lot of animals to figure out which mascot they wanted. Mascots in Notre Dame's infancy were a variety of animals, mostly dogs. The other animals are certainly noteworthy, as the South Bend Tribune noted on September 22, 1900. If Notre Dame is unsuccessful on the gridiron this fall, it will not be due to a lack of mascots, and if there is anything in variety of mascots, Notre Dame will be successful. When Dad Moulton, a trainer, arrived by train made up of two trick dogs and a canary bird, one of the dogs, a hairless Mexican, intends to be used as a hoodoo for opposing teams in conjunction with a black and white billy goat manager Eggman Mann received from Fort Wayne, unofficial animal mascots for the University of Notre Dame. The goat is of the Stockyards variety, with a record of having eaten 2 shirts and a pair of shoes in one morning. He has already shown a bellicose disposition, but under the care of Moulton, who intends to train him, he may be taught to save his combativeness for the opposing team. Not to be outdone by the trainer or the manager, football coach Pat O'Day intends to send Colorado to a friend of his who has pet kangaroos. With this aggregation of animals, the kangaroo hurdling hedge fences, the goat bucking the line, and the dogs doing tricks on the sidelines, Notre Dame should present a terrifying appearance to any antagonist. End quote. The dog that sticks out as a mascot, though, was a terrier named Clashore Mike, often referred to simply as Mike. In 1935, he became the official mascot, and Notre Dame officials really leaned into his status. According to Notre Dame, he had his own column in the football programs and bravely battled the Pitt Panther, Army Mule, and Navy Goat. Texas A&M. The phrase perfect season is usually bestowed upon a team that has gone undefeated and secured a national championship. A reasonable person would never argue that LSU's 2019 squad didn't just have a perfect season. The Tigers steamrolled everybody that came across, and they did it in style. However, Texas A&M had a truly perfect season in 1919, going 10-0 while also not allowing a single point. The strange thing here is that the Aggies didn't claim this title until 2012, when they also claimed the 1927 National Championship, as well as Big 12 titles in 1997 and 2010. Don't get it twisted, though. I'm pretty sure the 2019 LSU team would stomp A&M's 1919 squad any day of the week. Oklahoma State. While we're talking about national championships, let's discuss one of Oklahoma State's. The Cowboys were named the 1945 National Championships in 2016 after the American Football Coaches Association put together a committee of coaches to retroactively select schools who deserved the coaches' trophy between 1922 and 1949. As the result, the Cowboys ended up a winner. Oklahoma State finished 9-0 in 1945 after winning the Sugar Bowl 33-13 over St. Mary's. Army finished the season as the Associated Press's number 1 with a 9-0 record, and Alabama was number 2 with a 10-0 mark. The most interesting part of this is it technically makes Oklahoma State the first school to win a football and basketball national championship in the same year. Prior to Oklahoma State being retroactively crowned football champs, Florida was the only school to do so back in 2006. With just the right attitude, you can claim just about anything in college football. That concludes this You Don't Know Sports podcast. Did you know any of these sports stories or facts? Be sure to comment below, give it a thumbs up, and be sure to tune in for our next and newest edition of You Don't Know Sports.